In a primetime address on Tuesday night, President Donald Trump announced his pick for the Supreme Court to replace the late Justice Antonin Scalia, who died nearly a year ago.
Millions of voters said this was the single most important issue to them when they voted for me for president. I am a man of my word. I will do as I say, something that the American people have been asking for from Washington for a very, very long time. Today, thank you. Today, I am keeping another promise to the American people by nominating Judge Neil Gorsuch of the United States Supreme Court to be of the United States Supreme Court.
Neil Gorsuch is a 49-year-old federal judge, member of the Federalist Society, widely seen as a conservative jurist. Trump was able to nominate Scalia's replacement only because the Republican-led Senate refused to consider Obama's nominee for the post. On March 16th last year, Obama nominated Garland, but Republican senators refused to hold confirmation hearings. As a judge on the 10th Circuit, Neil Gorsuch ruled in favor of Hobby Lobby in the case deciding whether the company could refuse to provide birth control coverage to employees as required by Obamacare. Judge Gorsuch also has a long history of ruling against employees in cases involving federal race, sex, age, disability, and political discrimination and retaliation claims. Senate Democrats have vowed to filibuster his nomination. During remarks last night, Judge Gorsuch described Antonin Scalia as a lion of the law.
For the last decade, I've worked as a federal judge in a court that spans 6 Western states, serving about 20% of the continental United States and about 18 million people. The men and women I've worked with at every level in our circuit are an inspiration to me. I've watched them fearlessly tending to the rule of law, enforcing the promises of our Constitution, and living out daily their judicial oaths to administer justice equally to rich and poor alike, following the law as they find it and without respect to their personal political beliefs. I think of them tonight. Of course, the Supreme Court's work is vital not just to a region of the country, but to the whole, vital to the protection of the people's liberties under law and to the continuity of our Constitution, the greatest charter of human liberty the world has ever known. The towering judges that have served in this particular seat of the Supreme Court, including Antonin Scalia and Robert Jackson, are much in my mind at this moment. Justice Scalia was a lion of the law. Agree or disagree with him, all of his colleagues on the bench cherish his wisdom and his humor. And like them, I miss him.
To talk more about Judge Gorsuch, we are going to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by 2 guests. Ian Milhiser is Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress Action Fund, the editor of Think Progress Justice. His new article is titled, "Who is Neil Gorsuch?" He's also author of the book Injustices, the Supreme Court's History of Comforting the Comfortable and Afflicting the Afflicted. We are also joined by Nan Aaron, who is president of Alliance for Justice. Ian Milhiser, let's begin with you. Your overall response to President Trump's choice of Judge Gorsuch to be the next Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, I mean, this is a terrible pick. This is someone who will probably be to Scalia's right. Scalia was very bad on choice. I think that Gorsuch will match that. Scalia was bad on issues like birth control. Gorsuch will match that. But in addition to that, what makes Gorsuch very unusual is that he wants to dismantle the deference that courts have typically played to federal agencies. It's a very technical issue, but it's also very important. It goes to whether or not, when the people elect a Democratic president, that Democratic president is going to be able to protect the environment, to protect workers, to make wages go up, or whether they're going to be at the mercy of a Republican-controlled court. So his primary agenda is to shift power towards the judiciary at the very moment that the Republican Party is consolidating its control over the judiciary. And I think that that leads us to some very dangerous places.
He has been hailed as a man who is deeply erudite, a great writer, a classmate of President Obama at Harvard Law School. This crossed the spectrum. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's a very smart guy, and I mean, to some extent, that's what makes him dangerous. You know, this is someone who is going to, with great precision, with great intelligence, look for ways to implement a very conservative agenda, and that person, frankly, scares me more than someone who's dumb. I mean, this guy is extraordinarily competent, extraordinarily talented, and he's going to put all of considerable brain power towards implementing a very right-wing agenda.
Neil Gorsuch wrote in an essay in 2005 for the National Review in which he said, quote, American liberals have become addicted to the courtroom, relying on judges and lawyers rather than elected leaders and the ballot box as the primary means of affecting their social agenda on everything from gay marriage to assisted suicide to use of vouchers for private school education. He continued, this overweening addiction to the courtroom as the place to debate social policy is bad for the country and bad for the judiciary. Ian Milhiser, your response.
I would feel better if the views that he expressed in that article matched what his record on the bench, because at least if he's saying that the court should be less involved generally, that means that when liberals want something, they don't get it, but when conservatives want something, they don't get it either. What I've seen from Gorsuch is something else. What I've seen from Neil Gorsuch is that when liberals want something, regardless of whether there's precedent in their favor, he's looking for ways to dismantle those precedents. And when conservatives want something, he's going out of their way to give them their wish list. And that's even scarier than someone who just wants to dismantle the court's role in society.
Reproductive rights, Ian.
Well, as you said, he voted the wrong way in Hobby Lobby to say that a woman's boss has a degree of control over their access to birth control. He also went out of his way to try to defund Planned Parenthood in a very odd case in which he used the court's rules in a way that they're really not supposed to be used. So I don't think there's any question that not only is he going to vote the way that he voted in Hobby Lobby over and over again, but that he is anti-choice and will vote to dismantle Roe.
What do you mean on the Planned Parenthood front? Can you explain what that case was?
Sure. So it was actually a fairly minor case. There was a question of whether or not Planned Parenthood's funds could be cut off by the Utah governor. And the reason I call it a minor case is because it was really just a case about the governor's motivation. It was a totally fact-based inquiry. There was no grand legal question in play. And Gorsuch invoked a process that's used to make the whole court hear a case. It's typically only invoked, it's only invoked very rarely, and when it is, it's because there is some sort of grand legal principle at place. So the fact that he would try to do this in a case that legally was very small, even though obviously politically it matters a great deal what happens to Planned Parenthood, suggests to me that he is willing to use every tool at his disposal, and he's willing to break with traditions and break with ordinary process in order to push an agenda that's going to restrict access to reproductive rights.
Neil Gorsuch has long opposed assisted suicide, which his home state of Colorado legalized last year. He wrote a 2006 book called The Future of Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia. In it, he outlines his argument for retaining current laws banning assisted suicide and euthanasia, saying, quote, all human beings are intrinsically valuable and the intentional taking of human life by private persons is always wrong. What is the significance of this, Ian Milhiser, both on assisted suicide and what it means for reproductive rights?
Right. I mean, it's significant because it tells you immediately what he'll do in an assisted suicide case. But obviously the rhetoric that he uses there is the rhetoric that abortion opponents are using. The anti-choice rhetoric is to present the fetus as a human life and say that exactly what Neil Gorsuch said about human life in his book. So when you look at his full record, his vote in Hobby Lobby, his vote in the Planned Parenthood case, his adoption of the rhetoric of people who call themselves pro-life, I think it's very, very clear what he's going to do when he has an abortion case in front of him.
We're going to break and then come back to this discussion with Ian Milhiser, Senior Fellow at Center for American Progress Action Fund and editor of Think Progress Justice, and Nan Aaron, President of Alliance for Justice. Stay with us.